Ukrainian President Zelensky has announced that Ukraine has taken back control of the Kharkiv region. But is there a little more to this story than appears on the surface? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's break it down. Okay, so this is interesting because, well, Zelensky has publicly put out a statement that says, quote, Ukrainian forces have secured combat control of areas where Russian troops entered the northeastern Kharkiv region earlier this month, at least according to Zelensky. He said, quote, our soldiers have managed to take combat control of the border area where the Russian occupiers entered, Zelensky said in his nightly video address Friday evening, right? But these are at odds with Russian officials who continue to claim that they control more than half of the town of Volchansk, 3 miles inside the border. Of course, this has been a contested region for the last several weeks as Russian forces appeared to have launched their northern offensive early, likely in anticipation of growing Ukrainian strength as they receive more and more U.S. aid. Now, taking a look at the combat map, what I find interesting is that there hasn't actually been an update on the frontline region. The only change, right, you can see here appears to be a small noted repositioning of where Russian forces hold control, which shows them controlling actually slightly more westward of this town of Volchansk. And so when we look at Zelensky's statement, he uses a couple of interesting phrases. The first is combat control, right? Which is not the same thing. It is interesting because sometimes they simply announce, hey, we've liberated these villages, right? That seems to indicate some sort of sustained level of control. Combat control seems to denote something different. It may mean that they've achieved a temporary seizure of an area or that it's contested, but Ukrainian forces believe they are in charge, so to speak. This would be a really unusual to see something like this. But he also says, the interesting part of the quote is that they control the border area where the Russian occupiers entered. And that would imply that the actual point in which they entered looked like it was in Pilna. We'll back things up a month and we'll try to discern where exactly they entered, right? So you can see here, it looks like they entered through Pilna and maybe through Borisivka or possibly even through Stilecha. And then over here, you have them obviously entering through Pletenivka. And you can see Russian forces, right, pouring over the border, trying to expand out. So what I suspect this is a reference to is possibly Ukrainian forces attacking along this flank, seizing part of Pletenivka. Now, this would be a pretty tremendous advantage. They may also, it would be more difficult for them to take Pylena, because you can see that they would have to flank into Russian sovereign territory, something that the Western allies have been really reluctant to authorize Ukraine to do. But again, Ukraine has done it. Their Freedom of Russia Legion has operated in this region for some time. And again, as we've talked about, this is in a weird way Russia playing into Ukraine's hands because the Freedom of Russia Legion and other Ukrainian-backed Russian militia have operated in this region, and the idea was that it would force Russia to reallocate some of its forces from the Eastern Front to places like Belgorod, which they've done and are now sort of in this Kharkiv region, pinned down in some fighting where progress has at the very least stalled. Now, if Ukraine... I strongly suspect that this is a reference to Pletenivka. This is the area where where Ukraine is most likely able to seize control. Now, what this is a tremendous advantage because, as we've talked about, Russian forces fighting in Volchansk, they rely on supplies coming in through Russian sovereign territory. This is one of the chief advantages that they have, is that basically, because of Western prohibitions on Ukrainian weapon use inside Russian sovereign territory, Russian forces are able to set up really robust logistics, medical supply, all kinds of preparatory areas and support areas right up to the border in relative security, right? Without having to deal with the full brunt of Western provided weapons that Ukraine uses. And so this means that the Russian forces in Vovchansk are able to be better supplied, better supported in their fight because Ukraine basically can't stop them, right? This is in contrast with, for example, let's say you are fighting near Lyman Pershi and you're the one of these Storm Z units, the 138th Separate Motor Rifle Brigade. Well, in order to get supplies, right, in order to supply those forces, they have to transit, right? Let's say they use this road here. They have to transit approximately 30 kilometers through Ukrainian territory, meaning they are subject to Ukrainian strikes. And you can see how this becomes a tremendous logistical problem for Russian troops basically anywhere inside the front line. They have to transit through these areas where Ukrainian forces are authorized to strike. Not so here, at least now. But by seizing Pletenivka, Ukraine would sever that connection, right? And it would mean that that Russian forces fighting in Vovchansk would now have to at least work a little harder to maintain a level of resupply, right? Their best bet may be through this railway here. But honestly, it seems like there's only this road, right? And let's take a look over at this somewhat more detailed live UA map. You can see the T-2108 highway leading to Vovchansk. If they can seize that in Pletenivka, then there's not really much in the line of other routes. They could hand walk some limited supplies through this railway, but if the railway is destroyed, which is pretty easy to do, that's what they're going to be reduced to is basically hand carrying stuff through here. It may be possible that some of these small trails might also allow them to kind of walk supplies in, but this is very small and it's nothing like controlling a major highway that would allow a continuous flow of supplies to aid Russian forces fighting in Vovchansk. So I suspect that that's what has likely happened here. And it really is a bad news for the Russian forces in Vovchansk, who seem to have been getting stalled out and by some accounts possibly pushed back in some places. Overall, though, does it mean something terrible for the Russian troops? Well, we're going to talk about that in a second. But of course, guys, I wanted to just say a huge thank you to everyone that has purchased the 5-pack of Strike Gum. It's available now. It's on strikegum.com or on Amazon. It's perfect if you don't want to order just like a single pack. I understand that if you want to try it, the single pack is perfect. But you know, the shipping cost is basically the same no matter which of these you order because of how Shopify structures their shipping deals. And so if you are like, hey, the tray is a lot for me to try out, 1 pack isn't worth it, the 5-pack is for you guys. And here's the thing, that 5-pack, 5 of these packs, 25 total pieces. So the equivalent of 25 energy drinks. But unlike an energy drink, 0 sugar and 100 milligrams of alpha GPC, a nootropic found to improve cognition and athletic performance. So if you're interested in taking your, getting your energy to the next level and frankly, not having to spend $4.50 on a Red Bull, you want to check out Strike Gum. It's on Amazon too. So you can go to strikegum.com or you can go to amazon.com and search for Strike Gum. And of course, thanks to the people that have left us those 5-star reviews on the 5-pack. You know, it just debuted on Amazon, and it's really important for us to be able to tell consumers on Amazon that Strike Gum, it's not some shady made in China product, right? It's made here in the USA using high quality ingredients like natural caffeine, not some of the weird lab process stuff. And it's, you know, packaged, shipped, and it is proprietary, right? So that means that me and the guys at Liquid Core, we collaborated to make this formula. There is no other, there's no other knockoff with the same formula. So it's not some white label nonsense from a Chinese manufacturer. So when you guys leave 5-star reviews on Amazon, it tells consumers, hey, this is the real deal. So thank you. Anyway, check us out. Okay, so here's what I thought was kind of interesting. When you look at sort of the larger strategic situation, you can see Russian forces continue to make advances, but not really, the significance, we'll say, varies. One is outside of Ulcharatina near Arkhangelsk, and we've talked about this. I basically wrote off this whole region here because it makes so much more sense for Ukrainian forces to establish their final defensive lines along this Kalinova river and reservoir system here. It's such a powerful natural obstacle, and I suspect that the fighting here is kind of a planned, phased withdrawal by Ukrainian forces. And they're likely buying time for other forces to really establish really good defense works here near Kalinova. And by establishing this kind of good defensive position, it's going to be really hard for Russian forces to launch any kind of offensive action. So again, I see that kind of withdrawal, and if you've been on this channel, you know for weeks I've been saying it's going to happen. What I thought was more interesting is Russian forces trying to advance actually to the northeast of Umansky, which, as we've talked about, it seems like Russia wants to seize this, the town of Yasno Brodivka. So if they want to seize Yasno, they're going to have to advance through Natalyova, which they control this flank here. Then they're going to have to control the Umansky flank. And this is kind of a tall order, right? It involves Russian forces assaulting across open ground. And that's pretty tough for them. So they may continue to try to do this, but the thing is, they need to stop their forces from advancing near Yasno if they want to successfully seize this little peninsular position. And it's a little tough. I think sophisticated coordination among Russian forces is actually pretty tough. Command and control on that tactical level seems kind of limited because of the high churn rate of their forces. And so I think some of the more sophisticated, like flanking, holding, overwatch, blocking, it can get a little tough for those forces. Not to say impossible, but I think it's just kind of tough. And then the final area that I did want to point out real quick was near Klitschivka. Let's see if we can pull this up here real quick. In Klitschivka, we're seeing some Russian advances, but we've talked about this too. Let me give my face here. So you could see, right, Russian forces advancing through the absolutely obliterated town of Klitschivka. But we've talked about this before, that this is in low ground here, and these forces in these wood lines have the high ground. So they have really good observation. They have good fields of fire on Klitschivka. So while I understand Ukrainian forces may have chosen to withdraw, and Russian forces in this windbreak may be able to provide some level of fire support, I'm pretty skeptical that, one, there's any real value in holding Klitschivka itself as a village, right? It's obliterated. Its only value is in drawing Russian forces out and punishing them for doing it. And advancing into low ground when the enemy controls the high ground above you and you don't control the flanks is a really, really, really dangerous tactical decision. And the fact that Russia has kind of done so is just a sign that, again, they are willing to incur casualties at a pretty eye-watering level, and make things that don't make a ton of tactical sense, unless you accept that, like, Russia sits there and goes, we know this is going to incur a lot of casualties taking this town, but it is important that we seize this town, or the skeletal remnants of what used to be a town, even in the face of basically unrelenting Ukrainian drones and artillery. And they do it. Like, I'm not going to sit there and be like, they're not advancing. They are. And the Ukrainians are, but the Ukrainians, I think this is 50% Ukrainians being like, why would we fight here? Like we're fighting over nothing. This isn't worth it. We've punished the Russians enough. Let's let them sit in Klitschivka in the bottom of this barrel and get tore up by Ukrainian forces up here. Now, they may try to assault up the hill, up Klitschivka, and try to sort of pinch the Ukrainians out. That's possible. And that's likely what the Russians will try to do. But will they incur a lot of casualties in the meantime? Probably. So again, we're seeing a Russia that is committed to advancing anywhere and everywhere they can. It's not clear. There is a strategy. That strategy is continuous pressure across the front line. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Thanks to the Colonel tier members. Thanks to the Lieutenant tier members. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you appreciate this kind of analysis. And I will see you guys in the next one. Cheers.